Please stand by.
Excuse me, I'm talking.
It's coming. It's coming. It's coming. It's coming.
What is your name?
I am Jay Ramone, and this is the Jay Ramone Podcast.
If the FCC knew you were doing drugs on the air, shut us down!
This gets more work done more accurately.
I will sit down with bands, artists, chefs, business owners, and fellow Oklahomans to talk about their projects and dealing with day-to-day life.
This stuff can give you brain damage.
This is the Jay Ramone Podcast.
Power of the internet is truly amazing.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, man. How about you? Can you hear me?
I'm doing great, man. I can hear you just fine.
Great. Well, we'll hope that this trend continues then.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to do this. I know you're on the road. You got a busy schedule, but I'm a giant fan. Oh, I lost him.
All right.
There we go. All right.
Hey.
I thought it was me, so
I couldn't tell. It could have been me. I don't know, but we're back now. That's the important part.
The internet makes things a little difficult sometimes.
I know we've all had to become computer programmers and shit now, so that's good.
Bro, learning HTML when MySpace came out and then they changed the game, I had to relearn coding. I needed to stick with one path. So,
and I'm just always afraid, it's like I always think I'm going to ruin something. My kids come in and they're just like, click, 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 click. Doesn't bother them at all. So
I got two little kids, and a lot of times they're here at work with me, and they know they have free reign. They can do whatever. Yeah. Just let Dad talk.
Yeah, no, they don't mess anything up, so it's all good.
So I'm gonna give you a quick blast from the past, real fast. The very first time I saw you play, I knew nothing about you.
Yeah,
I was hired by a marketing company for an artist who was having a CD release party to promote that show in retail markets, like retail stores. They wanted me to go around, and it was a company out of New York that did this. It was one of my hustles in college was I would go street team for these marketing companies, and you send them pictures, they send you a check.
Yeah.
So I had heard of this artist from Oklahoma City who had a major label deal, but I'd never seen him, never listened to his music, and didn't know anything about you. And so I promote the show and do all that stuff. They send me my check, and the person sends me an email, says, "Hey, would you like to go to the show?" And I said, "Sure, I'd love to." I said, "Okay, we'll put your name on the list." At the time, I lived in Tulsa, about 90 miles away.
Yeah.
Drove down to Oklahoma City, went to the show at Bricktown Live. It was May 21st, 2004.
Yeah.
And you were opening for Graham Colton on his CD release party. And I sat there with my mouth on the floor the entire time you were playing, going, how in the fuck did I not know who Will Hogue is up until now?
Well, I love that. I remember that show. I mean, that was a fun night, man.
You stepped away from the microphone and continued to play, and I believe you covered an Otis Redding song, and you sang at full volume with no microphone with a full band behind you, and I could hear you clear as a bell at the back of the room, and it completely blew my mind and made me a fan for life. And I think I've only missed 2 times that you've been in Oklahoma since.
Man, that's really cool of you to say. Thank you. Yeah, it's I'm glad to get back over there and get to play again. So I'm glad we're getting a chance.
21 years later, I'm still a fan.
I love that. Well, if I hadn't ruined it by now, I feel like we're on pretty good track, man. So.
You're on the right path, my friend. You've kept me this long.
Yeah, thank you.
One question that I had that I've always wanted to know is when can we see the America EP hit the streaming platforms?
You know, that's funny. You mentioned that. We just had a conversation about this yesterday. I think it'll probably be next year sometime. We didn't realize that it wasn't on there, but that never came out on vinyl either. So we'll probably do a vinyl pressing and then put it up on digital platforms at the same time.
You just made my day because I am loving this vinyl resurgence that is happening right now.
Yeah, it's funny. And we started pressing vinyl what was considered really early. I think
Early?
Yeah, I mean, we started doing vinyl on my Draw the Curtains record, which was my 4th or 5th album. And, And then we did the
On the
limited
180
runs.
gram at that, way before everybody else.
Yeah, so I mean, it was so easy to get vinyl at that point because nobody was making it. Like you could call somebody on Tuesday and they'd be like, "Sure, we can turn vinyl around in 2 days or whatever if you send us the music." And but now it's been fun to go back and re-release and do things that never came out on vinyl or put things back out that only came out in really limited pressings and giving people an opportunity to get those things again is really fun.
Well, I think it's really cool that there's all of these pressing plants all over the country that are opening up now that were never there. It's not like they're reopening something that had
No.
closed. There was stuff that wasn't there, and they're just completely into it, and they want to see it grow. And there's so many of these independent ones that are doing really, really cool stuff.
Yeah, and it's just nice. I think from a fan's perspective, even if I think a lot of people are still listening on a digital platform, but I think if you're going to come to the merch table or go to the record store, you want to own, a physical copy of it, whether you play it or not. I mean, vinyl is just so much more. It's just a beautiful piece of art to hold, even if it's just that and you get to look at the record and see the liner notes and read the stuff in it. I think that the people that care enough about music to take that kind of time, they're going to buy that, 9 or 10 times out of 10, I feel like, which I love.
Absolutely. I've got my kids into crate digging, and when I take them to a show, if the band's got vinyl, we buy a record to take home and listen to,
Yeah.
and all of that.
Yeah. My kids have both got little rinky dink record players in their rooms, and love they still spend a lot of time on digital platforms and headphones when we're in the car and all that. But, just to even the fact that kids know vinyl exists at this point is a net win for all of us, I feel like.
I heard in a previous interview that you said you were having this record pressed at a plant in Texas. What pressing plant in Texas is doing it?
I just literally, Hand Drawn is the name of it.
I was hoping you would say that.
Yeah.
I'm a friend of Joe Finks from down
Yeah.
there, and he's a great dude. And I've actually toured their facilities, and it's awesome.
Yeah, Joe is really cool, and he's done the last few records for us, and he's always just super helpful, do a really great job replicating the art, the physical art, and then they do a great job of the manufacturing of the vinyl. But this one in particular, we wanted the album covers sort of one of those giant fair lollipops kind of held up to a camera, my face behind it. And I was like, what are the chances we could do vinyl that matches this lollipop on the cover? And he was like, well, you can't, because you can't do a spiral pattern on vinyl. He was like, but I'll send you a couple of things. And, they sent us these really beautiful rainbow splattered vinyls that come really close to matching the artwork. And so we obviously did that. And he was super excited to do it. It's fun because he and his whole crew are as excited about music, obviously, as you and I are, but where I get excited about the ins and outs of the studio or the writing process or whatever, they're that same way about vinyl pressing and manufacturing. And it's cool to have somebody that is an artist involved in that part of the art too.
If you've never been to their facility and watched records made, the next time you're in Dallas, you have to go because it was one of the coolest things I've ever done.
Yeah, there's a couple of places here in town that I've never been to their place, but getting to watch vinyl get cut is it's a pretty cool process for sure.
I was very, very fortunate. When he invited me to come down, I was like, you better believe it.
Yeah, that's great, man. I love those guys. I love it.
So did you think when you started out that you would be all these years later, 15 records and a handful of EPs and a handful of live records deep?
No, I mean, I guess in some ways, you think you'll have a career. I mean, you want that. You want to think like, okay, I'll make records for a long time. But no, I mean, really getting past the first record is a kind of a miraculous feat in and of itself. And when I don't spend a lot of time sort of looking back on those, but like when you talk about the numbers, I mean, it's a lot of records. I mean,
There's a lot of
there's a lot of
music.
bands. There's a lot of bands that have decades and decades long career, longer than I have, and they don't have half that amount of
No, they got 5
material.
records out there, you
Yeah,
know?
and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just it is pretty wild. I remember making the second record. We were in LA, and that was when we were really chasing the big time. And I remember thinking, like, God, do I even have enough? What if I had enough material to really make a second record? Um, and thinking that when I had done that, I had really climbed Everest in some ways. And then it's like, to continually do that again and again and feel great about the material and continue to grow. I
And
feel real lucky.
that was on Blackbird.
That was on Blackbird, yeah.
Okay, so what was it like getting to be in the same room with Ahmet Ertegun? Like
That
that
was
dude's
really
kind of a
wild.
legend.
Yeah, that was cool. So, we had made Carousel, and then Atlantic signed us, and we had put that out as an independent record. They signed us and put it out as a re-release, as an Atlantic release, and then we signed all the deal, and we're gonna go make the second record. And we were in New York meeting with Nick Casanelli, our A&R guy, and he got a call from literally the top floor, and they said Mr. Ertegun wanted to say hello and meet me and the band, and so we went. And it was funny to watch even the people that had been in that, like our A&R guy had been there for years, but had only met him once before, maybe, and I think never in this kind
Wow.
of situation. Um, yeah, it was cool. I mean, he signed so many people that changed my life as an artist, as a music fan. I mean, he changed the whole music business. He kind of sort of invented the modern record label and all of those things. And so getting to spend time with him was cool. And then to have him really talk, he had obviously, and he was very old at the time, and soon to not be involved in the label anymore. But, he had really taken time and listened to the record. He was talking about different songs and what he thought we should do on the road and how we should tour and different things like that. It was, when I think back on it, there's these little moments that you go like, man, that is pretty fucking wild I don't know if I can say that. Pretty wild that
You
that
can.
happened. And that's pretty high on the pretty wild list. Yeah.
Yeah, anytime you get to meet a legend like that. But on
Yeah.
the flip side of that coin, how many bands has he signed that didn't make it? We hear of all the
More.
success stories, but you don't ever hear about the ones that don't.
No, and there's definitely more of those than not. Yeah, they don't tell you that part. I mean, that doesn't
No.
keep the dream alive. You gotta.
The one thing that people tend to forget is a record label, the head of a record label and an A&R guy, his job is still sales. It's
Mhm.
still a sales job. He's got to sell his staff that this artist is going to be the next one.
Well, and then what I had to realize, I even at that really young part of my career, I've always considered myself and proven to sort of not be. I'm not a very naive person, but there was definitely some naivete around the sort of rock and roll ideals of things like that. Because I really thought, this. I didn't realize how much the major label thing was just sales driven, and not sales in if we had sold 20,000 records on our own, you want to sort of think like, well, if the label can help us sell 100,000 records, then that's a huge bit of growth, or 200,000 records, that's everybody's making, like, that sounds amazing. And then you realize, like, the same time that you're thinking that, they're looking at the second Hootie and the Blowfish record that only sold 7 million copies as
Right.
a failure. That's a failure to them. And it's like, man, in my wildest dreams, I don't know that, like, even as a teenager, to sell 10 million records. That sounds insane. So to sell 7 million and have it be a failure, I remember at that moment pretty early on going like, oh, I am destined to fail. Like that there is no, in their eyes, in this entity's expectations, there's zero chance of me succeeding. And that's not me being negative towards them or me. It's just we have very different expectations and ideas of what success is.
And there's so many variables in there. What's
Oh yeah.
popular at the time, all of the trends, all of those things. And I feel like you've kind of had an uphill battle in your career at the time that your music has come out. What has been hot or people leaning to has been a totally different sound than what you created. But what continued to make me a fan is you stayed true with your sound, even though each record is different. They sound
Yeah.
very different than one another. You were still in your own lane, so to speak. You didn't go trend chasing or change your sound to try and capture what was popular at the moment.
Man, I'm so glad you say that. That's something I've really tried to maintain. And I like new music. I like when trends come and happen. And, you discover, I try to, there's things sonically that happen. There's the way that all of a sudden drums are now being recorded differently, or people are bringing back a keyboard sound that you hadn't used before. I think bringing in those things into your own music is about growth. I mean, that I enjoy, but the idea, I remember real early on in those days of looking for record deals, somebody, we may have even made Carousel. It may have been when we were going out and working, on that. And so, like we'd sort of I'd established what I was and who I was. And, the sound is, like you say, I feel like it was defined kind of from the start. This is going to be this sort of, it's a straight ahead rock and roll, sound at the end of the day. And I love that. But I remember a couple of A&R people, they would come with these crazy recommendations. They'd be like, I heard your record. I saw your show. I think you're incredible. Have you ever thought about doing a record that's more like The Offspring? And it was like, yeah, no, I never have thought of that, because I would never, like, The Offspring makes really great records that sound like The Offspring. Why would you want my country ass making Offspring records? Like, it just doesn't, and there were tons of those. Or there'd be something else, like, what if it was more electronic or whatever? Just things that are, I have zero interest in. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm stuck here with myself, but I'll take it.
I feel like you've let the songs dictate how they sound, so to speak. Like when you write the
Yeah.
song, you kind of let it take its path.
I hope that I have continued to do that. I mean, I always want to serve the song. And the artists that ultimately I sort of admire the most in the world are the artists that did that, from, the Beatles are one of my first favorite bands, and they were obviously an example of, really chasing whatever sound they were into at the time. And then, you get into singer-songwriters, and, I think Neil Young has always been that way. Some records are incredibly loud and really rock. Some are very country and acoustic. Some like his Trans record we listened to in the van not long ago. A few guys in the band had never heard that record, and I played that for him. That record is just terrible. I mean, it's a terrible record, and I kind of love it though, because you do know that at the end of the day, that's exactly what Neil Young wanted to do at that point, and I love that. I don't have to listen to it, but I love that. Those are the artists that I really do admire the most. I mean, on a newer front, a guy like Tyler Childers that's just put out a new record, and people are losing their minds because it's not what he's always done before. And, I put it on and listened to it, and it didn't sound not like Tyler Childers to me. It sounded like Tyler Childers as a grown man, not as a little fucking kid like when he started making records. And so
Right.
I love that. He's another artist that I think continues to just try and grow, and while also holding on to writing great songs. I mean, that's certainly what I want to do in my own path, and I think there are a handful of really good people out there that are still doing that too, which I love.
Out of all your records that you've been a part of and you put out, uh, which one means the most to you personally?
And that's hard. I mean, it's cliche to say the new one because that feels like that's what everybody says. But there is a part, so it's sort of a twofold answer. Because I feel like my record making goes in these cycles. I feel like my career sort of, you don't know it at the time, but there's these chapters, and you don't know how long you're in a chapter. Um, but I feel like with this new record, I have. It was sort of the closing of a chapter and starting of a new one where I really felt like um, I was able to have a little bit wider canvas to paint with that I've always been looking for. And then I felt just like I was able to get a few more colors on the canvas, for lack of a bigger cliche. So the new one, I really am proud of it. It's also one of the first ones where I feel like um, you make enough records and people sort of stop paying attention. Even people that
Hmm.
like you, they sort of go like, "Oh, he's made another cool record or whatever," but it's just not. You don't get that same excited response always. And it's been interesting with this new record to feel like um, there's a rekindled excitement, I think, for me personally, for the band internally, but also for people that have heard the record, that are hearing the record. I've been really excited by the fact, just by the reaction from people that have heard the record. So this one is certainly one. And another one would be when I made the America EP that you mentioned. I mean, that's a really small record in a lot of ways, and it's a blip kind of in my arc. But that was a really interesting moment. I was signed to Atlantic. We had done well on the first record. We had done okay on the second record. We'd done well on the second record, and definitely could have made another one. Um, I really wanted to make that record, which was politically themed and tinged, and I had never really waded into that water, especially not at that point in my career, 2004. So I did the record on my own, and then we took it to Atlantic, and they just said, "Look, we love this. We believe in what you're doing, what you're saying, why you're doing it. We just don't want to be in the business of this type of record. So, if you want to put this out, we'll have to let you go and do it on your own. Or we can put you in with a different producer and you can do like a bigger record like we're thinking we want you to make." And I didn't want to do that. And so we left and started just carving our own path. But I loved that record. And so that's one I felt like it sort of gave me a plate of armor as an artist. I feel like, where it was like, okay, I've always said I wanted to do what I wanted to do. I've always said I wanted to say what I want to say, how I want to say it, when I want to say it. Especially musically. I don't mean just running off at the mouth and saying stuff
I,
to people.
I, I love your protest music.
Thanks.
I love both America and modern American protest. I love them
Yeah.
both equally.
Thank
And
you.
the America EP means more to me now, knowing that the carrot was dangled in front of you to do something different, and you chose to do it your own way anyway. I think that is absolutely incredible.
Thanks. Yeah. I mean, it was. I would love to act like it was this big, hard decision. Like I had to weigh all of these things. It really wasn't. I think it hurt my feelings a little bit. I probably carried some stuff there for a while, just of, you know, feeling like I was misunderstood. as an artist. And, you make that record, and there were a lot of people that did not like that record, especially coming right
You're
after
not wrong,
Blackbird,
man.
but there were a lot of people that did. I also felt like it, I feel like I'd been living in this room with kind of a locked door in a corner, and all of a sudden it just sort of cracked open, and you look and you're like, well, here's a whole nother area of this house that I've never explored. And it really, that record set me up to still be making records now, where I know if I had gone and written, and there's always songs laying around. I mean, I could have made a Blackbird 3.0 or whatever, and made a really cool rock and roll record with some big hooky hits on it. I mean, I could have done that, but I just don't think I would have been. I think what would have happened is then I would have continued to take maybe a baby step forward with sales, and then I would have just ended up trying to chase their success rather than my own desires. And I'm much more satisfied where I am, how I've gotten here, than I probably would have been even being more successful commercially. And
Whose Front Porch was the Bob Dylan cover recorded on?
so we did that record when we did the America EP. We went to Oxford, Mississippi. A friend of ours named Andrew Ratcliffe, friend of mine named Andrew Ratcliffe, had this really cool studio down there in the middle of, outside of town, about 10 miles, 15 miles. And the studio was one of these great places where it had bunk beds. You kind of lived there and worked there and ate there. And we were just there for a handful of days. We did it really quickly. And I recorded it in the middle of the night on the porch of the studio, just with one microphone, guitar, and vocal.
It's one of the raddest performances captured that I can ever remember. And I can't tell you how many times I've sat in a parking lot of a venue or bar with a group of people around my car, and I've said, you need to hear this. Like, you can hear
cool.
the bugs, you can hear the environment. They're clearly outside, and listen to this performance. And it's chilling.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I mean, it helps when the song is really great, and that one is. So, thank you, Bob Dylan, for that. My favorite thing about that is when we recorded it, we were going to ask about, what would it cost for us, because we were going to manufacture it. We wanted to talk to Dylan's people to sort of get clearance for it, or, if we needed to pay any money or whatever that was, if they wanted money moving forward. It's funny, my manager called somebody in Dylan's camp, and he had told me, he was like, look, you may not get an answer. You just never know with Bob what you'll get. He may say no, just who knows. But this could take months, and I was like, well, I mean, just run up the flagpole and see what happens. And within 24 hours, my manager called me back, and he was like, well, they got back to us and said, okay, and they want, and I wish I could remember the exact dollar amount, but it was insane. It was like, they want $37.28 or something like that. And it was the weirdest thing. And there was no explanation of why. And I have it in my mind that at some point, like Dylan was looking at a Land's End catalog or something and wanted like a turtleneck sweater that he liked, and they were like, hey, this dipshit kid wants to sing this song, what should we charge him? And he was like, $38.97. And I don't know, maybe we bought Bob Dylan a sweater, I don't know, but that was pretty funny.
Well, if I ever get the opportunity to talk to him, I'm going to ask, because I'm genuinely curious at this point.
Man, if you can find that, I'll buy you whatever he bought. I'll buy you the same thing if you can find that out. Yeah.
This year you got to re-release Carousel and Blackbird on a Lonely Wire. And before I started doing the digging to find out what was going on, because everybody's been doing this with their older catalog. And it's because they've been getting screwed over by the record labels, and they just figured we can re-record it and release our versions, and the fans will want those. So I thought that's what this was. No, Blackbird was in that massive fire.
Yeah, it was, and that was a bummer. And then we flirted with the idea, uh, when your best versions of your punk rock devils jump on your shoulder and go, okay, so there's two options now. We can just take the Blackbird CD, and I can go to a studio and I'll just rip it straight off the CD, and we'll burn a copy to put to vinyl, and we'll make just it won't be the same, but it'll be like, we'll do it that way, and then we'll press it up, and we'll just dare the record label to come and sue us for $1 a record for every one we sell or whatever. That's kind of punk rock and sounds
Yeah.
cool. The other option was, well, what if instead I had this group of guys that I've been playing with some in the studio. We had made what is now Sweet Misery, the new record, already. And it was like, well, I've already got these dudes kind of, ready to go for whatever I'm going to work on. What if we just also went back in and just re-recorded the record kind of closer to what I would have probably done to it?
Because how much
Anyway.
producer influence was involved in that first Atlantic record? A lot of times when you're on your first release with a major label, you don't have a lot of creative control as an artist sometimes.
Yeah, I really had a pretty good amount of creative control. And, and they had put me with a producer named John Shanks, who is just phenomenal. Great guitar player, incredible studio sensibility. Like, I learned so much on the making of that record, but I was also, I wanted to feel like I was playing on the team and not just trying to say no to everything. So, I mean, there were things, they really wanted that record to be a massive, huge success. And so to do that, there are some things that get done. Things have to be made bigger than they are, sonically, and there's some melodrama and things and just stuff like that was really cool to get to be a part of. But it was out of my comfort zone. And, again, you as a young artist, you also learn, if you just always stay in your comfort zone, then you don't grow. And so I was trying to mix. I mean, there are definitely some things on there that I wouldn't have done that we did that have become, a part of, like, oh, that's something I learned. You can double track a guitar in a certain way and make it sound bigger and poppier, and, thinking about melodic hooks under stuff. I mean, there's so much of that stuff that I really have brought forward into every record since. And there were other things that were, kind of overdone vocally, and I wouldn't do those things now. And the beauty of re-recording Blackbird was we didn't have to do that. So that was fun. It was fun to sort of get to bring all of the things from that original recording that I love, things that are still in the set, things sonically that I still adore, bring all of that forward. And then also the things that I've learned since then that I don't like, or other tricks that I've learned and things, bringing those into it too. It really is.
What about the cost difference of recording Blackbird originally versus re-recording it?
Oh
Because
man,
it was on tape, wasn't it?
I could almost pay my house off with what I could probably pay my house off with what we paid to record Blackbird originally.
That was the era of massive budgets, and studio time was a lot.
Yeah, and we worked on it for so long. We worked on that record. I remember we were going because we were making it in LA, and I was kind of living there part time. I mean, we were there a lot, and I remember my pal Carl Brommel, that is the guitar player with My Morning Jacket. He was living out there and working with another band at the time, but he had come in the studio, and we'd been in the studio, off and on. We'd go in for 2 weeks, and then Shanks would make another record, and we'd tour for a month, and we'd come back for 2 weeks. But I mean, we were there forever. And I remember Carl coming in one day and going, "Good Lord, are y'all making The River?" Like, he just couldn't believe that we were still recording. and I couldn't either. I mean, it's the longest I've ever taken to make a record. It's the most. I've probably spent more money on that record. I could have probably made all of my other records for what we spent
Combined.
on that record, and that was still pennies on the dollar for what major labels were paying for records.
Oh yeah, I mean, I know bands who spent millions in the
Oh yeah,
studio.
yeah. There was a lot of that. I mean, and that is another thing of. I mean, I'm talking to you now from my studio. That technology has also changed so much for the better, and it's just so much more accessible now. I mean, there's things. When we did Blackbird, that was the first record that was done at that point to a Pro Tools system. So we were still running. There were two engineers. You had an engineer that was recording the session into what you were hearing in the studio and what was going actually onto tape. And then they had another engineer that was taking the tape and taking it into Pro Tools. So there was a Pro Tool. It was such a weird time to be sort of on the cusp of that new technology. Whereas now,
I mean,
the
brand new at that time.
Say it again.
It was brand
It
new
was
at that
brand
time.
new. Yeah, it was totally brand new. I mean, they were bringing stuff by, because we were recording at Henson Studios, which is the old A&M Studios, which now maybe George Lucas owns or something like that. I can't remember. But
you recorded where Dr. Dre's The Chronic was recorded.
yeah, we did a bunch of stuff there. Carole King's Tapestry was done in the room we recorded in. We Are the World was done in the big room there that we recorded some of the string stuff in. Yeah, I mean, it was a cool time. It really was for a student of rock and roll lore. I mean, it was, to get to feel like for a little bit, I was really in the stream of all of that stuff. I mean, this is the room where the Doors recorded. This is the room, and you're walking those same streets. It was a really cool time to be a young man in a rock and roll band.
I'm a studio nerd, so all of those legendary studios, I dream come true to be a fly on the wall in some of those sessions.
Yeah, it was cool, man.
Unreal.
And to just even feel like, not that I'm by no means equating my importance to any of those things that we just mentioned, but it is, to even just sort of be on the roll of that studio and those places, that did really mean something to me. It still does. It still does mean something to me.
I've been watching a bunch of interviews that you've done over the last few years leading up to this, and you did a recent one where you were talking about your son, your oldest son, has started a band.
Yeah.
What is that like, being the dad of a musician now?
Man, it is incredible. Getting to watch, and timing wise, sort of what I was mentioning earlier about this sort of, I have this feeling of rebirth with this record and this sort of new chapter opening. And I feel like in some ways I have fallen in love with rock and roll again, which comes and goes like any relationship, But that being timed also at the same time that my son, sort of both, but my oldest one in particular, both sons are sort of really starting to discover music on their own. But my oldest being in bands and gigging for the first time and all that, like watching the just sheer innocence of a garage full of high school kids that are writing their own songs for the first time. And, the first time that you really get it right and it works, and the first time that you play in front of people and, you get that hit. And, man, it is so cool to get to watch. And, I just have to really not stay, I hate the parents that you go to the Little League game and it's some burned out guy that threw, 1 3-hitter when he was 12 and he's been chasing it ever since, trying to act like, his kids are going to be the next, Nolan Ryan or whatever. And that, I really pride myself on not pushing the boys to do anything with it. I do want them to I want my kids to love things, and watching him love it is really special. And that doesn't have to be a career. I tell it, we talked about it. They were out, my whole family came on the road this last week of summer vacation. And, he's way into it. He's paying attention to how things get set up. He's paying attention to how you know where you're going, how you book hotel. I mean, he's really, really a student in all things, and especially in this. But, I don't care if he makes his living doing that. I don't care if he just plays in a band when he's in high school and that's the end of it. But if he loves music and wants to play drums and guitar, like there's just, the arts are so important for everyone. I hope we will continue, to pass that on. I mean, there's nothing wrong. You can be a plumber and still want to write songs. You don't have to make a living doing it. It can be just an escape. That sometimes when you feel something you don't know how to deal with, you can sit down and write a song or play music together with your kids or your friends on the weekends. That's every bit as important as, what I am trying to do. So, very long-winded answer. It is incredible to watch your kid be in a band. He's got another gig this weekend, and I'm in town, so I get to go and, sneak in the club and stand in the back and watch him tear his shirt off and act like a heathen. It's going to be great.
I love that. So before I let you go, I'll tell you another story, and then I want to plug the record and talk about it
Yeah.
for a minute. I'll tease a little bit. You have a show coming up here in Edmond, Oklahoma, on the 14th of this month before the record drops on the 22nd. So I definitely want to encourage everyone to go to Edmond, go to the Old Ice House, and buy your tickets for Will on the 14th. But there was a show here in Oklahoma City at an old punk rock venue. It was called the Conservatory, and
Yeah.
you did one of the coolest things I'd ever seen. As somebody who's managed bands and has always kind of been a part of the business in helping bands get to that next level. I always try to help them get to that goal and then step back and help the next young one who's trying to get there. And I had helped a couple of bands get on the show to open for you. And I said, I want you to watch how he performs on stage because every show is different depending on the room and the crowd. And
Yeah.
you're one of those that you just don't have a set list for the tour and walk out there and go, this is our show, we're doing it.
Right.
Every show has been completely different, even when I've seen you multiple nights in a row.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going into your last song and you're there on stage and you're giving your speech and you're playing the chord progression, and I can tell immediately it's This Highway's Home. And you're
Okay.
introducing the band members and saying thank yous and all of that. And then you just look at the crowd and you go, you guys follow me. And you're just still playing and talking, and you walk right over to the merch booth. And the merch guy takes a chair and just sets it right in front of the merch booth, and you stand on top of it. And the whole band follows you and plays This Highway's Home acoustic. And I thought it was the most genius thing ever because you brought the entire crowd to the merch booth, which is where you make your gas money, your food money, your hotel money. I was like,
Yeah.
that's the most genius business move I've ever seen. And it came across completely genuine. And if you go back and you watch the YouTube videos that people took on their cell phone, every single person was into it and singing every word. And they left with an experience they'll never forget.
Well, that's real cool. And that's just way easier than picking the merch up and bringing it to the front of the stage, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I like those moments of, yeah, I'm
I don't know if
lucky
you've ever
enough.
done that before, but it came across completely spontaneous.
Yeah, no, it's pretty spontaneous. I mean, the no mic thing or playing in the crowd. I mean, we're really fortunate. There's a cool thing. You can look at kind of where you are. The rooms that you play. I guess the sort of dream scenario is that you could play 2,000 seat theaters sold out everywhere you go. And the reason that's a dream for me is because you can still take advantage of those moments, like playing without a mic and getting people to really to feel it in a way. That's you're never going to get that. Just saw my friends Shinedown. They took my son to see them play here a month or so ago. And they're playing for 30,000 people or whatever. And they do a cool little broken down thing in the middle where they're playing acoustically. And, in that way, I mean, it's really a beautiful thing to see. And it's a version of that where
That's
you're,
the only way they could do that is have a little catwalk and a little thing. They couldn't just go out in the crowd and recreate that with 30,000 people there.
yeah, and you can't. And there, I mean, and the difference is they can fly on a private jet to the gig, and I have to drive a van. I mean, so I mean, there's trade offs, but one of the beautiful things about the level and the size of rooms that I am playing in is those things are still possible. It's possible to just sort of, and I have a band that's good enough, and I'm as a band leader am just dumb enough to try those kinds of things. I don't want to, we don't pre-plan a lot. There's nights where it falls apart, but having the ability to try those things, I think ultimately that's what keeps people coming back to a show, for 20 years. Cause it's like, well, I don't know, man, the one time they did this thing, I've never seen that again. And then sometimes you see it again one time and you're like, I can't believe that was sort of like this other thing. Yeah, I feel really fortunate to be in a spot where I can do that. And hopefully we've cultivated an audience that enjoys that kind of as much as we do.
So before we get out of here, let's talk about Sweet Misery, the new record. It's coming out officially on the 22nd of August, and you've got pre-orders available now on your website. Tell me about the process of your mindset of making that record.
Well, I had a batch of songs. I was kind of in the throes of thinking I was going to make another record, and some guys that had been in my band for a while. I had a drummer that left, and then I had a guitar player that left also. So it was just me and Chris, my bass player, and I was kind of like, well, I don't even know now what to do. I had brought down a keyboard player that's a friend of mine and another guitar player from a band called Red Wanting Blue, my friend Eric Hall. He came down from Ohio, my friend Mark Maysfield, who I had met playing with Dave Haas when I was producing those records for them. He came down, and the three of us went into a studio, and we'd recorded 6 songs or so, just sort of, I wanted to try to build something differently because I didn't have a band. And so we were just sort of doing kind of interesting things with a drum machine and doing that. And then at that point, I was supposed to go in as producer and make a new Tim Haas record. And I had put together this really great rock and roll band, a drummer named Adam Willard, who's an incredible rock and roll drummer who I had not worked with before. And a really cool guitar player that I had met named Nathan Keederly here in Nashville. And then I had put Mark on keys, and then my bass player Chris was going to play bass. We were going to do this Tim Haas record, and then Tim and Dave have a festival in Philly, and so they had to move the sessions. And so at that point, I had a month or so lead time, and this great band and a great studio booked, and I thought, well, why don't I look back at the songs that we had sort of tracked, and we kept parts of them, and I rewrote some things, and I wrote some more songs, and I was like, I'm just going to keep this band and do a record on my own. And so brought everybody in and started from scratch, and it was really a dream getting to work like that because, that group of guys, none of them had ever worked together before. Everybody's really become close pals since then, and it's some guys that I've built friendships with that I have no doubt will be lifelong friendships in music and outside of music. But it was cool because I really felt like for the first time in a while, I had complete free reign to do musically whatever I wanted to do, from the loudest to the quietest, things that I could imagine. And to have that excitement, I felt like it really got captured on tape, which was great. It's a record I'm super excited for folks to hear.
August 22nd, it is officially out. You can buy Sweet Misery in advance now and get the cool vinyl pressed up by Hand Drawn Records down in Texas. And then don't forget, August 14th, the Old Ice House in Edmond, Will Hogue Live. I'll put a link to tickets in the description. And looking forward to the show, Will. Thank you so
Thanks, man.
much.
You too. And I can't say this for sure, wink, wink, but there may be copies of the record for sale at the show by then.
Well,
Somebody may have
I
boxes
will
of
be
the
taking one
vinyl.
home with me that night.
Done. Somebody may
For
have them in the
sure.
other room right now waiting to load up. But yeah, so get there for that too.